Senator Kennedy took to the Senate chamber and declared that the national government awarded $2 billion in taxpayer funds to an enterprise holding merely $100 in its account, possessing zero actual achievements, and featuring Stacey Abrams as its lead attorney. Please subscribe. Let us play the footage.
Mr. President, as you know, when Vice President Harris and President Trump ran against each other for the presidency, one of the planks in President Trump's platform was that he was going to review every penny of federal government spending. Why did he say that? Why did he promise to do that? Well, first, there's a moral principle involved. People worked hard for their money, and when they give it to government, they're entitled to expect government to spend it efficiently. Number two, President Trump ran on that plank because of our debt. The federal debt is $36.5 trillion. You know, we throw these numbers around like a trillion, you know, we start to take them for granted. To give you a little perspective, this $36.5 trillion, it grows bigger by the second. It's going to increase. If we just keep doing what we've been doing, it's going to increase $1 trillion every 100 days. If we just keep doing what we've been doing, it's going to increase $10 billion a day. Today, nothing changed. We added $10 billion in debt. That's also $417 million an hour. That's $6.9 million a minute. I think I've been talking about a minute. We just added $7 million to our debt. That's why the president wants to get rid of spending porn. The reaction here in Washington, Mr. President, has been breathtaking. I understand Washington is not exactly a slice of America. I get that. I understand that Washington is not normal. Normal in Washington, D.C. is a setting on the dryer. So I get all that. We're different in Washington. But the pushback to President Trump's effort through Mr. Musk and his team to reduce spending has just been extraordinary. I mean, people are barking and yelping and shrieking about it. They sound like the game room in a mental hospital. And I get that a lot of people don't like President Trump, and I get that many people don't like Mr. Musk, and I get that Mr. Musk is different. I kind of like that. I mean, I like different. You know, he's the sort of guy that would wear, I don't know, he'd wear Crocs to a wedding. I get that. I find it kind of refreshing. But nobody's ever called him a dummy. And he's found an incredible amount of waste and abuse of taxpayer money, what I call spending porn. I'm not going to repeat everything I repeated or I said the first time we talked about this, but Mr. President, it seems to me to be once again extraordinary that people are mad at President Trump and Mr. Musk for the process they're using, but no, they're not mad about the money being wasted. I mean, Mr. Musk, whether you like him or not, he's found, for example, $7.9 million we spent to teach Sri Lankan journalists to avoid binary gendered language. He's found money that was given to an NGO to empower the LGBT community in Armenia. He found $1.5 million that we spent to rebuild the Cuban media ecosystem. $2.1 million to the BBC to strengthen the media ecosystem in Libya. $8.3 million spent for equity and inclusion education in Nepal. Does no one care about how the money was actually abused and wasted? Mr. President, it's not unusual for me to be disappointed for some things I see in Washington. And under the last administration, I have to admit, I was disappointed just about every single day. I'd almost gotten used to it. But last week, and this is what I want to talk about, Mr. President, I read a story. It was a story about the abuse of taxpayer money in the last administration. And it was so nauseating that it triggered my gag reflex. In April of 2024, not that long ago, the EPA under President Biden gave $2 billion in taxpayer money to an organization that had absolutely no experience, that was backed by a very prominent Democratic politician by the name of Ms. Stacey Abrams. Here's what happened. In 2022, as you know, Mr. President, President Biden and my Democratic colleagues passed the Inflation Reduction Act. Not a single Republican voted for it, not one, either in the House or the Senate. We knew at the time that spending $1.2 trillion, that's what the Inflation Reduction Act cost, would only make inflation worse, not better. And even President Biden eventually admitted that the Inflation Reduction Act did absolutely nothing to raise prices. Even President Biden, at the end of his term, admitted that. So where did all the Inflation Reduction Act money go? Fair question for taxpayers to ask. I mean, there's nothing wrong with wanting to know what they do with our money. Let me say that again. There's nothing wrong with wanting to know what they do with our money. So where did all the Inflation Reduction Act, this $1.2 trillion, go? Well, President Trump and DOGE, the group appointed by President Trump, and the EPA under new leadership, under Mr. Lee Zeldin, have begun to follow some of that money. Now, this is where Ms. Stacey Abrams comes in. I think it's fair to say that Ms. Abrams is, I don't know, I would call her controversial. She has the right to believe what she believes. This is America, and she has the right to free speech. I'm not criticizing that, even though I disagree with some of what she says. But I think it would be fair to describe her as controversial. She's probably best known for the fact that she ran for governor of Georgia twice, and she lost. In her career, Ms. Abrams has said the following. I don't want to just articulate hyperbole here. I want you to read her words, not mine. On April 20th, 2024, Ms. Abrams appeared on MSNBC with Reverend Al Sharpton, and this is what Ms. Abrams said, quote, "What we know is that the attack on diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, is an attack on democracy." On September 20th, 2022, during a panel discussion in Atlanta, Ms. Abrams said this about a baby's heartbeat, a fetal heartbeat, the heartbeat of a baby in a mother's womb. This is what Ms. Abrams said about a fetal heartbeat. She said it is, quote, a manufactured sound designed to convince people that men have the right to take control of a woman's body. end quote. My word, her words, not mine. In May of 2022, during a Georgia gubernatorial debate, she's running for governor of Georgia now. Ms. Abrams called Georgia, quote, the worst state in the country to live in. In October of 2022, during another Georgia gubernatorial debate, Ms. Abrams accused the sheriffs, all of the sheriffs in Georgia who endorsed her opponent, Governor Brian Kemp, of wanting, quote, to be able to take black people off the streets. In October of 2022, Ms. Abrams appeared on MSNBC. She suggested that abortion is a solution to inflation. Here's what she said. She said, quote, let's be clear. Having children is why you're worried about your price of gas. It's why you're worried about how much food costs, close quote. Her words, not mine. Let me say again, Ms. Abrams has the right to her opinion. This is America. You're not free if you can't express yourself. But I do think any fair-minded person would have to conclude that Ms. Abrams is controversial.
Here is exactly what the mainstream press refuses to report. Kennedy arrived at the Senate chamber equipped with a calculator, a stack of IRS tax returns, and Stacey Abrams' exact words, proceeding to expose one of the most revolting instances of federal corruption he has ever witnessed in D.C., which is truly profound considering his lengthy tenure there. First, regarding the financial crisis, Kennedy began by highlighting the figures that every citizen faces daily, but hardly anyone in the Capitol is willing to vocalize. The national deficit stands at an astonishing $36.5 trillion, expanding by $1 trillion every 100 days, surging by $10 billion daily, $417 million hourly, and $6.9 million every 60 seconds. Kennedy remarked that he had likely been speaking for about 60 seconds, meaning the country just tacked another $7 million onto its massive shortfall. This severe reality explains why President Trump vowed to audit every single cent of federal expenditures, and it is the exact reason Elon Musk and Doge were established. It is not driven by political leanings, but simply because the financial equations are fundamentally broken. Second, concerning the Capitol's response, Kennedy depicted the massive resistance in D.C. against slashing budgets using the absolute most unforgettable phrase of his entire address. He observed that the backlash has been unbelievable, noting that politicians are howling, squealing, and screaming until they resemble the recreation ward of a psychiatric facility. The senator acknowledged that Trump is not universally loved, and Musk is certainly unconventional, comparing the billionaire to someone who might sport casual rubber clogs at a formal marriage ceremony. Yet, Kennedy finds this bluntness invigorating, while pointing out that no one could ever honestly call Musk foolish. What Kennedy genuinely found mind-boggling was how officials remain enraged at Trump and Musk over the methods they employ to uncover financial squalor, while completely ignoring the absolute outrage of the wasteful spending itself. Third, examining the Doge audit trails, Kennedy rattled off Musk's preliminary discoveries. $7.9 million allocated to train Sri Lankan reporters to shun binary gender terms. Funds handed to an activist group to support the LGBT population in Armenia, $1.5 million intended to reconstruct Cuba's press networks. $2.1 million granted to the BBC to bolster Libyan broadcasting, and $8.3 million dedicated to diversity and inclusion schooling in Nepal. Kennedy posed the critical question that not a single member on the Democratic side could manage to address. Does absolutely nobody care about how these funds were practically thrown away? Next came the massive Abrams revelation. In April of 2024, the Biden Environmental Protection Agency handed over $2 billion in citizen tax dollars to an entity known as Power Forward Communities. Power Forward Communities operated as a completely fresh charitable group established merely months prior to securing this massive federal award. And on its initial IRS paperwork, it reported its entire gross income as exactly $100 alongside zero actual programmatic achievements. Kennedy quipped that he had personally witnessed a local Girl Scout troop demonstrating significantly more impressive financial and operational qualifications. This newly minted enterprise held a blatant tie to Stacey Abrams, as she functioned as the lead legal advisor for one of its core collaborating entities. The Biden EPA somehow allowed only 21 days to disperse $2 billion to an operation clutching merely $100 in its checking account, yet simultaneously granted them 90 days to simply figure out how a fiscal ledger operates, 21 days to blow $2 billion, and 90 days to comprehend basic accounting. Finally, transitioning to the Abrams statements, Kennedy recited her exact rhetoric straight into the official legislative transcript, noting her claims that a fetal pulse is an artificial noise constructed to allow male dominance over female autonomy, that Georgia represents the most dreadful state in the nation for residency, that terminating pregnancies serves as an economic remedy for inflation, that every Democratic lawman in Georgia supporting Brian Kemp aimed to remove black citizens from society, and that criticizing DEI initiatives constitutes an assault on our republic. Kennedy declared that since we live in America, she absolutely maintains the constitutional freedom to vocalize every single one of those extreme opinions. He subsequently challenged whether any reasonable and objective individual reviewing that track record would ever entrust that exact same figure with $2 billion of hard-earned public wealth. They ultimately awarded the fortune to her regardless. So you decide for yourself if that is truly how your government is supposed to handle your monetary contributions.